Blood trailed behind Brody O'Malley's Palomino as the horse trudged wearily across the Montana plains, its once steady gait now faltering with each step. The setting sun painted the vast landscape in hues of orange and crimson, much like the stain spreading across Brody's torn shirt. His vision blurred as he struggled to remain upright in the saddle, one hand clutching his wounded side while the other loosely held the reins. The bullet had torn through him during the ambush 2 days back, leaving him feverish and growing weaker by the hour. "Just a bit further, Sundance," he murmured to his loyal mount, though he had no destination in mind. Anywhere far from Carson's gang would do. The memory of their betrayal burned almost as fiercely as his wound. In the distance, a small homestead materialized like a mirage against the darkening sky. Smoke curled from the chimney of a modest cabin, and a barn stood nearby. Brody's instinct was to avoid it. Strangers weren't to be trusted. Not in his condition, but Sundance seemed to have other ideas, veering toward the property without prompting. As they approached, a woman emerged from the cabin, rifle in hand. Even through his haze, Brody noted her practical work dress and the chestnut hair pulled back from her face. She stood her ground as he approached, neither welcoming nor sending him away. "Madam," Brody managed, his voice a rasp. He tried to tip his hat in greeting, but instead found himself sliding from the saddle, his strength finally giving out. Before darkness claimed him, he heard her voice, clear and commanding. "Don't you dare die on my property, cowboy." The next thing Brody knew, he was staring at a wooden ceiling, his body aflame with pain yet somehow still alive. He tried to move but found himself too weak. "I wouldn't try that if I were you," came a female voice. Turning his head slightly, Brody saw the woman from earlier sitting beside the bed, her hands busy with some needlework. In the light of the cabin, he could see her properly young, perhaps 25, with intelligent green eyes that assessed him coolly. "Where am I?" he asked, his throat parched. "My homestead, about 20 miles east of Fargo," she replied, setting aside her work. "I'm Kate Keller. Most folks call me Kate." "Brody O'Malley," he returned, then immediately regretted sharing his name. Old habits died hard. "I need to go. My horse, your horse is fine." "Better than you, in fact." Kate stood and approached him, pressing a firm hand against his shoulder when he tried to rise again. "You've lost a lot of blood, Mr. O'Malley. That bullet nearly killed you. It still might if Carson finds me here." Brody grimaced, both from pain and from the knowledge that he was putting this stranger in danger. Something in Kate's expression hardened. "Is that a threat, Mr. O'Malley?" "A warning," he clarified. "The men who did this will be looking for me. I need to keep moving." Kate's laugh held no humor. "You wouldn't make it 10 feet from this bed. Besides, a spring blizzard blew in last night. No one's going anywhere for a few days." As if to confirm her words, Brody became aware of the howling wind outside, rattling the cabin's windows. "You extracted the bullet?" he asked, noting the clean bandages wrapped around his torso. "I did. Not my first, though I hope it's my last." She crossed to a basin of water and wrung out a cloth. "Fever's coming down, which is good. Infection was my biggest worry." When she returned to place the cool cloth on his forehead, Brody caught her wrist. "Why help me? You don't know me from Adam." Kate met his gaze steadily. "I don't need to know a man's past to know when he needs help. The wounded cowboy tried to ride away, but I said, 'You're safe here, stay.' And I meant it." Brody released her wrist, something unfamiliar stirring in his chest, something dangerously close to trust. "Rest now," Kate continued, her voice gentler. "No one's finding you in this storm, and you need to heal." Despite his better judgment, Brody found himself obeying, his eyes growing heavy as exhaustion overtook him once more. The next few days passed in a blur of fevered dreams and moments of clarity. Brody would wake to find Kate changing his bandages or coaxing him to drink broth. Sometimes she read aloud from one of her books, her voice steady and soothing. Other times he'd wake to find her simply watching him, her expression unreadable. On the fourth day, Brody woke feeling significantly stronger. The storm had passed, leaving behind a pristine blanket of late-season snow. He managed to sit up on his own, wincing at the pull of stitches in his side. "Well, look who's rejoined the land of the living," Kate remarked, entering from outside with an armful of firewood. She wore men's trousers and a heavy coat, her cheeks flushed from the cold. "Seems that way," Brody agreed. "Though I reckon I've been poor company." Kate shrugged, depositing the wood beside the stone fireplace. "You talk in your sleep. Quite entertaining, actually." Brody felt heat rise to his face that had nothing to do with fever. "What exactly did I say?" "Nothing incriminating, if that's your worry." She removed her coat and hung it on a peg by the door. "Though you mentioned someone named Carson more than once, I take it he's the one who shot you." He gave the order. One of his boys pulled the trigger. Brody's jaw tightened at the memory. "We were partners, rode together for 3 years. Kate nodded, not pressing for more as she busied herself with the fire. "Must be quite the falling out." "You could say that." Brody watched her work, noticing the efficient way she moved, the strength in her hands. "You live out here alone?" "I do now," she answered simply. The silence that followed told Brody not to pursue that line of questioning. Instead, he asked, "How long before I can ride?" Kate turned to him, assessing. "Another week at least, and that's if you don't tear those stitches." She dusted her hands off and approached the bed. "Let me check your wound." Brody sat still as she unwrapped the bandages with careful hands. Her proximity was unsettling, the scent of soap and something uniquely her like wildflowers and sunshine filling his senses. "Looking better," she pronounced. "Still angry, but the infection's gone. You were lucky." "I was," he agreed, his eyes on her face rather than his wound. "Lucky you found me." Their eyes met, and for a moment something electric passed between them. Kate was the first to look away, reaching for fresh bandages. "What's your story, Kate Keller?" Brody asked softly. "What brings a woman like you to the middle of nowhere, all alone?" Kate's hands stilled briefly before continuing their work. "Same as most, I suppose." "Looking for something better than what I left behind." She tied off the bandage with a firm knot. "Not so different from you, I'd wager." Brody couldn't argue with that. They were both runners in their way. "When the weather breaks," Kate continued, "I need to ride into town for supplies." "Think you can manage not to die while I'm gone?" The corner of Brody's mouth lifted in a half-smile. "I'll do my best. See that you do. I've invested too much time in keeping you alive to have you quit on me now." She returned his smile, and Brody felt something shift between them, the beginning of trust, perhaps, or something more dangerous. As the days passed, Brody's strength returned gradually. He began moving around the cabin, first to the table for meals, then eventually helping with small tasks. Kate proved to be as capable as she was independent, running her small homestead with quiet efficiency. She kept chickens and 2 milk cows, had a vegetable garden waiting for spring planting, and hunted when necessary. Yet there were signs that she hadn't always lived this solitary life. Her speech was educated, her manners refined when she chose to display them. One evening, as they sat before the fire after supper, Brody finally asked the question that had been on his mind. "You're not from around here, are you?" Kate glanced up from the shirt she was mending his shirt, he realized with a start. "What gives me away?" she asked, a hint of defensiveness in her tone. Brody shrugged. "Little things. The books you read. The way you speak when you forget to put on that frontier accent." Kate's eyebrows rose. "I have an accent. Everyone does. Yours changes sometimes. He watched her face carefully. You don't have to tell me. I'm just curious about the woman who saved my life. Kate set aside her mending with a sigh. Philadelphia, she said finally. That's where I'm from. My father was a banker. Brody nodded, waiting for her to continue. I came west with my husband 4 years ago. He had grand ideas about making a fortune in the Montana Territory. A shadow crossed her face. He wasn't cut out for this life. When winter came, he couldn't handle the isolation. Left for Fargo one morning and never came back. He abandoned you out here. Brody couldn't hide his disbelief. Oh, he intended to return, I'm sure, but there was a blizzard. Kate's voice was matter of fact, but Brody could see the old pain in her eyes. They found his body in the spring, frozen about 5 miles from town. He'd gotten lost in the storm. I'm sorry, Brody said softly. Kate shook her head. It was 3 years ago. I've made my peace with it. After he died, I had a choice: go back east in shame or make something of this place. She gestured around them. I chose to stay. Brave choice, Brody observed, or stubborn. Kate smiled faintly. What about you, Mr. O'Malley? What's your story? Brody hesitated. His instinct was to deflect, to tell the sanitized version of his life that revealed nothing important. But Kate had shared her truth with him, and he found himself wanting to offer something real in return. I grew up in Texas, he began. Father was a rancher, wanted me to follow in his footsteps, but we didn't see eye to eye on much. He stared into the flames, memories rising. When I was 18, I saddled up and rode out, never looked back. And then, Kate prompted, drifted. Worked cattle drives, broke horses, did whatever paid. Brody's voice grew quieter. Met Carson during a job in Colorado. He had big plans, said we could make real money if we stuck together. What kind of work did you do for him? Kate's question was careful, neutral. Brody met her eyes, deciding in that moment not to lie. Nothing I'm proud of. We started with cattle rustling, moved on to stage coaches. Nothing violent at first, or that's what I told myself. Kate's expression remained unchanged. And then it changed. It always does. Brody's hand drifted to his wounded side. Last job went bad. A guard got shot. I wanted out, and Carson decided that made me a liability. So he tried to kill you. Gave me a parting gift, as he called it. Brody's laugh held no humor. Left me for dead 20 miles from anywhere. Kate studied him for a long moment. Why tell me this? You must know I could turn you in. Could, Brody agreed, but I don't think you will. You're very sure of yourself for a man who nearly died in my front yard. Not sure of myself, Brody clarified. Just sure of you. Something flickered in Kate's eyes, surprise perhaps, or something warmer. She stood abruptly, gathering the mending. It's late, she announced. We both need rest. As she turned to go, Brody called after her softly, Kate. She paused, looking back over her shoulder. Thank you. For everything. Kate nodded once, then disappeared behind the curtain that sectioned off her sleeping area, leaving Brody alone with the crackling fire and the weight of his confessions. The following morning, Kate announced she needed to ride into Fargo for supplies. The snow had melted enough to make the trails passable, and they were running low on essentials. I'll be gone overnight, she told Brody over breakfast. Town's too far to make it there and back in one day. Brody nodded, fighting an irrational sense of disappointment. I'll look after things here. Kate gave him a skeptical look. You're barely on your feet. Just rest and don't undo all my hard work. Yes, madam, he said with mock solemnity, earning a rare full smile from her. As she prepared for her journey, Brody noticed a change in her demeanor, a tension that hadn't been there before. He watched as she checked her rifle and tucked a small revolver into her coat pocket. Expecting trouble? He asked casually. Kate paused. Just being cautious. Some folks in town. They have ideas about a woman living alone out here. Understanding dawned on Brody. Anyone in particular I should know about? There's a man named Wilson who owns the mercantile. He's been persistent in his attentions since my husband died. Kate's tone was measured, but Brody could see the discomfort in her eyes. Nothing I can't handle. Brody wanted to offer to accompany her, but knew he wasn't strong enough yet for the long ride. Besides, Kate clearly valued her independence. "Well, if you're not back by tomorrow night, I'll come looking," he said instead, keeping his tone light. Kate rolled her eyes, but there was gratitude in her expression. "My hero," she teased, but the words held no mockery. After she left, the cabin felt strangely empty. Brody occupied himself with small tasks, careful not to overexert himself. He fed the chickens, made sure the firewood was stacked by the door, and even managed to prepare a simple meal when evening came. As night fell, he found himself increasingly restless. Without Kate's presence, the cabin felt less like a sanctuary and more like a cage. He thought about Carson and his gang, wondering if they were still looking for him. The smart move would be to leave as soon as he was able, for his safety and for Kate's. Yet the thought of riding away from this place, from her, sat uncomfortably in his chest. By the time he finally fell asleep on Kate's small sofa, his dreams were troubled by images of Carson's men finding the homestead, of Kate in danger because of him, of choices he wasn't ready to make. Morning came with no sign of Kate, which was expected. She'd said she'd be gone overnight. Brody used the time to continue his recovery, walking the perimeter of the property to build his strength. By midday, he felt confident enough to saddle Sundance and take a short ride, testing his endurance. The wound pulled but held together, and he was pleased with his progress. As the afternoon waned with still no sign of Kate, Brody found himself watching the trail to Fargo with increasing frequency. He told himself it was natural concern for a friend, because somehow, against all odds, that's what Kate had become. A friend. Perhaps the first real one he'd had in years. The sun was low on the horizon when he finally spotted a rider approaching. Relief flooded through him, followed immediately by alarm. Kate's horse was galloping at full speed, and even from a distance, Brody could tell something was wrong. He rushed to the porch, ignoring the protest from his healing wound. As she drew closer, he saw that Kate was hunched forward in the saddle, her face pale. When she reached the yard, she practically fell from her horse, and Brody moved quickly to catch her. "Kate, what happened?" he demanded, supporting her weight against him. "Wilson," she gasped, clutching her side where blood had seeped through her coat. "He followed me, out of town." Rage surged through Brody as he helped her inside. "He shot you." "Tried to force himself on me when I made camp," Kate explained through gritted teeth as Brody lowered her onto the sofa. "I fought back. He didn't like that." "Let me see," Brody said, gently removing her coat to reveal a blood-stained shirt beneath. The wound appeared to be a deep graze along her ribs. "Bullet just caught you. You're lucky." "Doesn't feel lucky," Kate grimaced. Brody worked quickly, gathering the same medical supplies she had used on him. With careful hands, he cleaned and bandaged the wound, his touch as gentle as hers had been. "Is he coming?" he asked as he worked. Kate shook her head. "Don't think so. I shot back, hit him in the leg. He fell and I ran." Brody nodded grimly. "Good, but we should be prepared just in case." After ensuring Kate was comfortable, Brody checked both her rifle and his own, placing them within easy reach. He then prepared a simple meal from the supplies she'd managed to bring back before her encounter with Wilson. As night fell, Brody kept watch while Kate drifted in and out of sleep. The role reversal wasn't lost on him. Now he was the caretaker, she the wounded one in need of protection. Near midnight, Kate woke fully, her eyes finding his in the dim firelight. "You're still up," she observed, her voice stronger than before. Just being cautious, he replied, echoing her words from earlier. Kate struggled to sit up and Brody moved to help her. You should rest, he admonished gently. I've rested enough. She settled against the arm of the sofa, studying him. Thank you, Brody. For what? You're the one who saved me, remember? Kate's smile was tired but genuine. For being here. For not running. The simple honesty in her words touched something deep within him. Nowhere I'd rather be, he admitted, surprising himself with the truth of it. They sat in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the occasional howl of a distant coyote. Tell me something good, Kate said suddenly. Something from before. All this. She gestured vaguely, encompassing their wounds, their pasts. Brody thought for a moment. When I was a boy, there was this creek on my father's property. Crystal clear water over smooth stones. In summer, I'd spend whole days there, catching frogs and building dams with sticks. The memory came easily, untainted by the harder ones that followed. It was the one place I felt free. Kate smiled, her eyes soft. That sounds lovely. Your turn, he prompted. Kate considered. When I first came west with Henry, my husband, we stopped in this little town in Nebraska. There was a festival happening with music and dancing. Henry couldn't dance to save his life, but he tried. Her laugh held more fondness than bitterness now. He stepped on my toes so many times, but we laughed until we couldn't breathe. It was the happiest I'd seen him. He sounds like he was a good man, Brody offered. He was, just ill-suited for the life he chose. Kate's expression grew thoughtful. What about you? Any loves left behind? Brody shook his head. None that mattered, the life I've led. It doesn't leave much room for attachments. And now, Kate asked, her voice quiet. What kind of life do you want now, Brody O'Malley? It was a question Brody had been asking himself with increasing frequency since arriving at Kate's doorstep. Before he could formulate an answer, a sound outside caught his attention, the distinctive crunch of footsteps in snow. Brody was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand. Stay down, he whispered to Kate, moving to the window. In the moonlight, he could make out two figures approaching the cabin. One was limping heavily, Wilson, he presumed, while the other moved with confident purpose. They were armed. 2 men, he reported quietly to Kate. One's limping, guessing that's your friend Wilson. Kate had retrieved her revolver and was checking the chambers. And the other, don't know, but they're not here for a social call. Brody's mind raced through options. His instinct was to confront them directly, but with Kate injured and his own wound not fully healed, a firefight wasn't ideal. They needed a different approach. Is there another way out of the cabin? He asked. Kate nodded. Root cellar, trapdoor under the rug. Leads to a tunnel that comes out near the creek. Brody raised an eyebrow. Escape tunnel. You're full of surprises, Kate Keller. Henry was paranoid about Indian attacks, she explained quickly. Never needed it until now. A voice called from outside, confirming Brody's suspicions. Miss Keller, I know you're in there. We need to discuss what happened today. Wilson, Kate whispered, her face hardening. That's him. Miss Keller, the voice continued, you've left me no choice but to take matters into my own hands. You shot me in cold blood. Liar, Kate hissed, her knuckles white around her revolver. The second man spoke then, his voice carrying clearly through the night air. We know you're harboring a fugitive, madam. Brody O'Malley is wanted for robbery and murder in 3 territories. Turn him over and we'll consider your situation more favorably. Brody's blood ran cold. The second man wasn't with Wilson by chance. He was hunting Brody. But how had they found him? Kate's eyes met his, questions evident in her expression. Bounty hunter, Brody explained in a low voice. Or law. Either way, they're working together now. What do we do? Kate asked, her voice steady despite the fear he could see in her eyes. Brody made a quick decision. "We use your tunnel. Get to the barn, take the horses, and ride out. We can lose them in the dark." "And go where?" "I know a place," Brody assured her. "Old line shack about 15 miles west. We can hole up there until we figure things out." Kate hesitated. "This is my home, Brody. Everything I have is here. And it will still be here," he promised. "But right now we need to go. Wilson's out for revenge, and that bounty hunter won't stop until he has me. Neither of us is in any shape for a fight." The men outside were growing impatient, their voices rising with threats. They didn't have much time. Kate nodded finally. "All right, help me with the trapdoor." Together, they moved the rug and revealed the wooden door set into the floor. Brody lifted it quietly while Kate gathered essentials, food, ammunition, medical supplies into a small pack. "Ladies first," Brody whispered, offering his hand to help her into the dark passage. Kate took his hand but paused before descending. "If we do this, we're in it together. You understand? No running off on your own once we're clear." Brody squeezed her hand gently. "Together," he agreed. "I promise." Something passed between them in that moment, a covenant deeper than words. Then Kate was descending into the darkness, with Brody following close behind, pulling the trapdoor shut above them just as the sound of boots reached the cabin porch. The tunnel was narrow and low, forcing them to move in a crouch. Brody felt the strain on his wounded side but pushed through it, focusing on Kate's form ahead of him in the darkness. The earthen passage was surprisingly well constructed, with wooden supports at regular intervals and a packed dirt floor that muffled their footsteps. After what felt like an eternity but was likely only a few minutes, they reached another ladder. Kate climbed up first, pushing open another trapdoor that led them into a small shed near the creek, just as she had described. Through cracks in the wooden walls, they could see the cabin in the distance, now illuminated by lantern light as Wilson and the bounty hunter searched inside. "We need to move quickly," Brody whispered. "The barn is exposed. They'll see us if they look this way." Kate nodded, her face pale but determined. "I'll create a distraction. There's a stack of firewood behind the barn. If we set it alight, it should draw their attention." "Too risky," Brody argued. "You're already hurt." "So are you," Kate countered. "Besides, I'm faster. I can set it and be back before they know what's happening." Before Brody could protest further, Kate had slipped out of the shed and was moving swiftly through the shadows toward the barn. He watched, his heart in his throat, as she reached the woodpile and quickly arranged some kindling. A match flared in the darkness, then caught, flames beginning to lick at the dry wood. Kate was halfway back to the shed when a shout went up from the cabin. She froze momentarily, then changed direction, darting instead toward the barn's side entrance. Brody understood immediately their original plan was compromised, but Kate was adapting. He moved from the shed, keeping low, and made his way to join her at the barn. Inside, Kate was already saddling her horse, her movements swift despite her injury. Brody quickly did the same for Sundance, both of them working in urgent silence as shouts and the sound of running feet grew closer. "Ready?" Brody asked, mounting up. Kate nodded, swinging into her saddle with a grimace. "West, you said?" "West," Brody confirmed. "Follow me and don't look back." They burst from the barn just as Wilson rounded the corner, his rifle raised. Brody fired a warning shot that sent the man diving for cover, giving them the seconds they needed to urge their horses into a gallop. Behind them, the bounty hunter emerged from the cabin, adding his gunfire to Wilson's, but they were already racing into the darkness, the sounds of pursuit fading behind them. For nearly an hour they rode hard, following game trails and creek beds to obscure their tracks. The moon provided just enough light to navigate by, and Brody led them on a circuitous route, doubling back several times to confuse any pursuit. Finally, when the horses began to tire and he was confident they weren't being followed, he slowed their pace. "How are you holding up?" He called to Kate, who was riding close beside him. "I'll live," she answered tersely, though he could see the pain etched on her face. "Not much farther," he promised. "The line shack is just beyond that ridge." The cabin he had in mind was one he'd discovered during his travels with Carson's gang, a forgotten relic from an abandoned ranch. Too remote to be of use to most, but perfect for men who needed to disappear occasionally. As they crested the ridge, Brody was relieved to see it still standing, a dark silhouette against the night sky. They approached cautiously, but the shack was empty, just as Brody had hoped. It was a simple one-room structure with a small stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, and a narrow cot along one wall. Dusty but serviceable. After tending to the horses in the lean-to beside the cabin, Brody helped Kate inside. Her wound had begun bleeding again during their hard ride, and her face was alarmingly pale in the light of the lantern he'd found and lit. "Sit," he ordered gently, guiding her to the cot. "Let me look at that." Kate didn't protest, which concerned him more than the wound itself. She was normally so fiercely independent. Her compliance spoke volumes about how badly she was hurting. Brody worked quickly to clean and rebandage her injury, relieved to find that while the wound had reopened, it wasn't significantly worse. When he finished, Kate remained sitting on the cot, her shoulders slumped with exhaustion. "You should rest," he told her, covering her with the single blanket he'd found in a trunk. Kate looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the lantern light. "What about you? I'll keep watch," he said simply. "Get some sleep, Kate. We'll figure things out in the morning." For once, she didn't argue, lying down on the cot with a soft sigh. Within minutes, her breathing had evened out into sleep, the lines of pain easing from her face. Brody settled into one of the chairs, positioning himself where he could see both the door and Kate's sleeping form. As he kept his vigil through the long night, his thoughts turned over their situation like worn cards in a gambler's hands. They couldn't go back to Kate's homestead, not with Wilson and the bounty hunter searching for them. Kate had lost everything because of him: her home, her safety, the life she had painstakingly built for herself. The guilt of it sat heavy in his chest. By morning, Brody had made a decision. As soon as Kate was well enough to travel, he would take her to the nearest town with a decent law presence, somewhere Wilson wouldn't dare follow, set her up with enough money to start over, and then leave. It was the only way to ensure her safety. The thought of parting ways with her created an unexpected ache in his chest, but he pushed it aside. Her well-being had to come first. Kate woke as dawn light filtered through the shack's single window. She found Brody still at his post, his eyes tired but alert. "Did you sleep at all?" she asked, her voice rough with sleep. Brody shook his head. "Wasn't tired." "Liar," Kate said, but there was no heat in the accusation. She sat up carefully, wincing slightly. "How far do you think we are from my place?" "About 20 miles as the crow flies." "Why?" "Just trying to get my bearings." Kate looked around the cabin with a critical eye. "Not exactly the cattleman's hotel, is it?" Brody chuckled. "Sorry about the accommodations. It was the best I could do on short notice." "It's perfect," Kate assured him. "Hidden, defensible. Though it could use a woman's touch. And some food," Brody added, suddenly aware of his empty stomach. "I'll see if I can find us something to eat. Think you'll be all right alone for a bit?" Kate raised an eyebrow. "I managed 3 years on my own before you came along, Mr. O'Malley." "I think I can handle a few hours." Brody smiled at her spirit. "I don't doubt it for a second, Miss Keller." He checked his rifle, ensuring it was loaded before heading out. The morning was crisp but pleasant, the sun beginning to warm the air. Brody moved cautiously through the surrounding woodland. alert for any sign of pursuit, but found only the usual forest sounds: birds, the occasional rustle of small animals in the underbrush. Luck was with him, and within 2 hours he had bagged 2 rabbits. On his return to the shack, he gathered some wild onions and a handful of early spring greens to supplement their meal. When he entered the cabin, he found Kate had been busy in his absence. The place had been swept clean, the single window washed, and a fire burned cheerfully in the fireplace. She had also sorted through their meager supplies, arranging them neatly on the small table. "Impressive," Brody remarked, holding up his catch. "I brought dinner." Kate smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "Perfect. I found some old coffee beans in that trunk. They're stale, but they'll do." As they prepared the meal together, Brody was struck by the easy rhythm they fell into, moving around each other in the small space as if they'd been doing it for years. It felt right, domestic in a way he hadn't experienced since childhood. Over their simple but satisfying meal, they discussed their situation. "Wilson won't give up easily," Kate said, sipping the bitter coffee without complaint. "He's had his eye on my land for years. This is the excuse he needs to try to take it." "And the bounty hunter?" Brody asked. "Any idea how he found me?" Kate frowned. "Could be coincidence, or—" She hesitated. "When I was in town, I heard talk of a group of men asking about a wounded rider. I didn't think much of it at the time." "Carson," Brody said grimly. "He must have put the word out." "If your old partner and this bounty hunter connect, we'll have more than just Wilson to worry about," Kate observed. Brody nodded, his earlier decision solidifying. "Which is why we need to get you somewhere safe, away from all this." Kate set down her cup with a sharp click. "What do you mean, get me somewhere safe?" "We're in this together, remember, Kate," Brody began carefully. "You've already lost too much because of me. I can't let you lose more. Let me." Kate's eyes flashed. "I don't recall asking your permission for anything, Brody O'Malley. This is my choice." "It's not a choice at all," Brody argued. "You're in danger every moment you're with me. Wilson, Carson, bounty hunters, they'll never stop looking." "So your solution is to what? Drop me in some town and ride off into the sunset?" Kate's voice had risen slightly. "And what about you?" "Where will you go?" Brody shrugged. "Doesn't matter, I'm used to moving on." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have." Brody stood, suddenly unable to sit still under her scrutiny. "Kate, be reasonable. You had a life before I showed up bleeding on your doorstep. A good life that you built for yourself. You can have that again." "Can I?" Kate challenged, rising to face him despite her injury. "Do you think Wilson will just let me waltz back and reclaim my homestead? Do you think anything will be the same now?" Brody had no answer for that, and Kate pressed her advantage. "The life I had is gone, Brody. I accepted that the moment we fled through that tunnel. Now I'm choosing what comes next, and I choose to face it with you." Her words hung in the air between them, charged with something neither was ready to name. "Why?" Brody asked finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why would you choose this? Choose me?" Kate stepped closer, her green eyes holding his. "Because when I found you half dead in my yard, something changed. For 3 years I've been existing, not living. Then you came along with your secrets and your wounds and your stupid, noble ideas about protecting me. And suddenly, I remembered what it feels like to care about tomorrow." Brody's heart hammered in his chest. He wanted to reach for her, to pull her into his arms and never let go, but fear held him back, fear that he wasn't worthy of what she was offering, fear that he would only bring her more pain. "I'm not a good man, Kate," he said hoarsely. "The things I've done, the man you were did those things," Kate interrupted. "The man standing before me now is someone else entirely." "How can you be so sure?" The question contained all his doubts, all his self-loathing. Kate's smile was gentle. Because a bad man wouldn't be trying so hard to protect me from himself. The simple logic of her words cut through his defenses. Before he could respond, a sound outside caught their attention, a horse approaching. Instantly, they were both on alert. Brody grabbed his rifle, motioning for Kate to move away from the window as he positioned himself to the side, peering cautiously through the glass. A single rider was approaching, not Wilson or the bounty hunter from the previous night, but a man Brody recognized immediately, his blood turning to ice in his veins. "Carson," he breathed. Kate went pale. "How? Doesn't matter, he's found us." Brody's mind raced. The shack had only the one door and a single window, defensible, but also a potential trap. "Is there a back way out of here?" Kate shook her head. "Just the door and window." Carson had stopped about 50 yards from the cabin, clearly visible in the afternoon light. He was alone, which surprised Brody. Carson rarely went anywhere without his men. "Brody," Carson called, his voice carrying easily across the distance. "I know you're in there, old friend. I just want to talk." "Like you talked with that bullet," Brody muttered. Kate touched his arm. "What do we do?" Brody considered their options. They could try to make a break for it, but Carson would see them the moment they left the cabin. They could wait him out, hope he grew bored or impatient, but Carson was nothing if not persistent. Or Brody could face him, end this once and for all. "Stay inside," he told Kate firmly. "If anything happens to me, don't hesitate, take my horse and ride north. There's a marshal in Fort Benton who's honest. Tell him everything." "Brody, no," Kate protested. "You can't face him alone. I started this with him. I need to finish it." Brody checked his revolver, ensuring all chambers were loaded. "Besides, I'm not alone anymore." He glanced at her, allowing himself a small, genuine smile. "I have something worth coming back for." Before Kate could argue further, Brody moved to the door. "I'm coming out, Carson," he called. "Just you and me." He stepped outside, keeping his revolver ready but not raised. Carson sat easily on his horse, a smile playing on his lips as he watched Brody approach. He looked exactly as Brody remembered, tall, broad-shouldered, with a handsomeness that belied the coldness in his eyes. "There he is," Carson drawled. "The man who wouldn't die." "Sorry to disappoint," Brody replied evenly, stopping about 20 paces from Carson's horse. Carson chuckled. "Not at all. I'm impressed, truth be told. Shot, left for dead, and yet here you are." His gaze shifted to the cabin. "With a woman, no less. Moving up in the world, Brody." "What do you want, Carson?" Brody kept his voice steady, though rage simmered just beneath the surface. "Straight to business. I've always liked that about you." Carson dismounted smoothly, though he kept a respectful distance. "I want what's mine. Nothing here belongs to you. Now that's where you're wrong." Carson's smile faded. "You took something when you left, Brody, something valuable." Understanding dawned on Brody. "The money from the Hayes job." $5,000, Carson confirmed. "My $5,000. Your blood money," Brody corrected. "From a job that got a man killed." Carson waved a dismissive hand. "Casualties happen in our line of work. You knew that when you signed on." "I never signed on for murder." "Yet here we are." Carson's eyes hardened. "Where is it, Brody?" "Where's my money?" The truth was, Brody had hidden the money shortly after fleeing Carson's gang, burying it near a landmark only he would recognize, intending to retrieve it once things had cooled down. He hadn't touched a cent of it, unwilling to spend what had been paid for in blood. "It's gone," Brody lied. "Spent it all in Fargo before your boy caught up with me." Carson studied him for a moment, then laughed. "You always were a terrible liar." "The money's hidden somewhere, and you're going to tell me where." "Or what?" Brody challenged. "You'll shoot me again, finish the job this time." "That depends entirely on you." Carson's gaze drifted to the cabin again. "And on how much you value your new friend's life." Fury surged through Brody. Leave her out of this, Carson. This is between you and me. Everything and everyone you care about is my business now, Brody. Carson's voice had taken on a dangerous edge. You betrayed me. That has consequences. The door of the cabin opened and Kate stepped out, her revolver held steadily in her hand. I believe Mr. O'Malley asked you to leave, she said clearly, her voice carrying across the yard. Carson's eyebrows rose in surprise, then amusement. Well, well, she's got spirit, I'll give her that. He turned back to Brody. Last chance. The money or things get unpleasant. Brody knew he had to end this now one way or another. Carson would never stop hunting him, and now Kate was in his sights too. The thought of her in danger because of him was intolerable. Walk away, Carson, Brody warned. Just walk away. Carson sighed theatrically. I was afraid you'd say that. His hand moved toward his holster. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Carson drew, his movement lightning fast as Brody had known it would be. Brody dropped and rolled, drawing his own weapon as he moved. 2 shots rang out almost simultaneously, Carson's bullet whistling past where Brody had been standing, and another from the direction of the cabin. Carson staggered, a look of surprise crossing his face as he looked down at the spreading red stain on his chest. His revolver slipped from suddenly nerveless fingers as he sank to his knees. Brody rose cautiously, his own weapon still trained on Carson. He glanced briefly toward the cabin to see Kate standing firm, smoke still curling from the barrel of her revolver. You shot me, Carson gasped, disbelief evident in his voice as he looked past Brody to Kate. I did, Kate confirmed steadily. And I'd do it again. Carson's laugh was wet with blood. Quite a woman you found, Brody, he coughed, red speckling his lips. Always knew it'd end like this, just thought I'd be the one, still standing. As the light faded from Carson's eyes, Brody felt no triumph, only a profound weariness. This man had once been his friend, his brother in arms. Somewhere along the way they had lost sight of that brotherhood, replaced it with greed and betrayal. Kate approached slowly, coming to stand beside Brody as they both looked down at Carson's body. Are you all right? She asked softly. Brody nodded, unable to find words immediately. After a moment he said, You saved my life. Again. We saved each other, Kate corrected gently. She holstered her revolver and took Brody's hand in hers. It's over now. But Brody knew it wasn't over, not completely. Carson's men would wonder what had happened to their leader. The bounty hunter was still out there, and Wilson was waiting back at Kate's homestead, likely believing it was now his for the taking. As if reading his thoughts, Kate squeezed his hand. One problem at a time, she advised. First, we need to deal with this. She gestured to Carson's body. They buried Carson on the ridge overlooking the line shack, marking the grave with a simple wooden cross. No words were spoken over him, neither Brody nor Kate could find anything appropriate to say. The man had lived by violence and died the same way. There was tragedy in that, but also a certain harsh justice. As they stood by the fresh grave in the fading light, Kate broke the silence. What happens now? Brody took a deep breath. That depends. On what? On whether you still want to face whatever comes next together. Kate turned to him, her expression serious. I meant what I said earlier, Brody. My choice is made. Brody studied her face, searching for any sign of doubt or regret, but found only certainty. Something long frozen within him began to thaw, a feeling he barely recognized as hope. Then we have some decisions to make, he said. Starting with that money. Kate's eyebrows rose. The money Carson mentioned, you really have it, Brody nodded. Hidden about 3 days' ride from here. I never spent a cent of it, couldn't bring myself to, but now. Now what? Now I'm thinking it could be put to better use. A fresh start, somewhere far from here. Somewhere no one knows us. Kate considered this. "What about my homestead? We could sell it," Brody suggested. "Find a lawyer in Fort Benton to handle it, so you never have to face Wilson again. And your bounty. Won't the law be looking for you wherever we go?" Brody smiled grimly. "That's the thing about bounties, they're only good if someone knows who to look for, in a new place with new names." Understanding dawned in Kate's eyes. A completely fresh start. Exactly. Brody took her hands in his. "Kate, I can't promise it will be easy. There will always be risks. But I can promise that if you choose this path with me, I'll spend every day trying to be the man you believe I can be." Kate stepped closer, her face tilted up to his. "I don't want you to be anything other than who you are, Brody O'Malley. The man who rode into my life half dead but brought me fully back to living." The space between them vanished as Brody drew her into his arms, his lips finding hers in a kiss that felt like coming home. Kate returned the kiss with equal fervor, her arms winding around his neck, holding him close as if afraid he might still disappear. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Brody rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Kate Keller," he said simply. The words he had never spoken to another soul flowing naturally now. Kate's smile was radiant. "And I love you, my wounded cowboy." They spent the night in the line shack, making plans for their future while finding comfort in each other's arms. By dawn, they had decided on California as their destination, far enough to be a true fresh start, yet not so remote that Kate would feel completely cut off from civilization. Over the next several days, they traveled cautiously, first to retrieve the hidden money, then to Fort Benton, where, as Brody had suggested, they found a reputable lawyer willing to handle the sale of Kate's homestead without her needing to return to the area. The lawyer also provided them with information about California's Central Valley, where land was fertile and reasonably priced. As they prepared to leave Montana behind, Kate took Brody's hand as they stood on the outskirts of Fort Benton, their horses loaded with supplies for the long journey ahead. "Any regrets?" Brody asked, studying her face in the morning light. Kate shook her head. "Not one. You?" "Only that it took a bullet to bring me to your door," he replied with a smile. "Though I'd take another if it meant finding you again." Kate laughed. "Let's hope that won't be necessary." With a last look at the town and the life they were leaving behind, they mounted their horses and set their faces westward, toward the promise of a new beginning. The journey to California was long and not without its challenges. They traveled the lesser-known routes, avoiding major settlements where Brody might be recognized. Along the way, they encountered the expected hardships of the trail: difficult terrain, unpredictable weather, occasional shortages of supplies, but faced each obstacle together, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. Near the Wyoming-Idaho border, they exchanged wedding vows beside a mountain stream, with only the wild as their witness. Brody fashioned a ring for Kate from a gold nugget he had carried as a lucky charm since his early days on the frontier, carefully working the soft metal into a simple band that Kate treasured more than any store-bought jewelry. By early autumn, they reached the Sacramento Valley, where they purchased a modest ranch with fertile soil and a view of distant mountains. They registered the deed under the name O'Brien, close enough to O'Malley that Brody could respond naturally, different enough to shed the wanted posters that might still bear his true name. They built their home with their own hands, board by board, nail by nail. Kate planted a garden that flourished in the California soil, while Brody proved to have a natural talent for horse breeding, eventually developing a line of sturdy, intelligent mounts that were sought after throughout the region. 3 years after settling in California, Kate gave birth to their first child, a daughter they named Elizabeth. 2 years later, a son joined their family, Michael, with his father's dark hair and his mother's determined spirit. Their home was filled with laughter, occasional tears, and the kind of deep contentment that neither had believed possible in their earlier lives. On rare occasions, news from Montana would reach them. They learned that Wilson had eventually been arrested for attempting to intimidate other homesteaders, his schemes finally catching up with him. Carson's gang had dispersed after their leader's disappearance, most members meeting violent ends, as is often the way with such men. One spring evening, as they sat on their porch watching their children play in the yard, Kate turned to Brody with a smile. "Do you ever think about how differently things might have turned out?" Brody took her hand, running his thumb over the gold band that symbolized their commitment. "Every day," he admitted. "If that bullet had hit an inch to the left, if Sundance had taken a different trail, if you had decided a half-dead cowboy wasn't worth the trouble. If I hadn't said you're safe here, stay," Kate added softly. "Exactly." Brody's eyes held hers, still filled with the wonder of how their lives had intertwined. Sometimes the smallest moments change everything. Kate leaned against him, her head resting comfortably on his shoulder as they watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues of orange and gold. "I'm glad you stayed, Brody O'Malley," she whispered. "So am I, Kate," he replied, pressing a kiss to her temple. "So am I." In the distance, their children's laughter rang out, a joyful sound that echoed across the land they now called home, a sound that reminded them daily of how a moment of compassion, a choice to trust, had transformed two wounded souls into something greater than themselves. A family, built on love that had begun when a wounded cowboy tried to ride away, and a brave woman said, "You're safe here, stay."